easily,
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth session of our fifth series of LinkedIn Lives. And today we've got David George from Bikmo. Super excited to be speaking to Dave today. And just as a sort of reflection of what we've talked about so far. So we kicked off with Sean Rand from Mind Data, talking about his journey from mental health at university through to his initial target audience and then switching onto a B2B stance. And then Richard Clark, who moved to the Canary Islands and really found the secret sauce to team happiness and really using team happiness as a key KPI to growth. And then last week we had Gemma Stewart, who founded Getsy Health after a career in consulting, but really wanted to solve her own problem. And since gone on a massive journey, but last week won a Startup UK award. So it's obviously on the right track. So today we're talking about pivoting. I will pass over to Dave to talk about how you got into Bikmo and how it started in the first place.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so my name's David George. I'm the founder CEO at Bikmo, lifelong rider from the Lake District in the UK. Bikmo, as it is today, we are a specialist cycle insurer. Our mission is to protect the world's riders, and we do that through building quite simple but comprehensive policies that protect riders for when life happens. We operate across 5 countries in Europe, with protecting over 80,000 riders, and we're lucky enough to partner with some of the biggest brands in cycling, from British Cycling in the UK, Yeti, Norco, some really nice brands, Brompton, and so forth. And we operate as what you call an MGA in the insurance space. We do everything from pricing, policy wording, right through to claims management. But I think our kind of main USP is really the experience that we provide to the end customer, such that we're there when they need us, and absolutely sort of 6-star claims experience. But we try to ensure sort of day on day or month on month, we're providing value to our riders and making the whole process easy and quite quick. And I guess sort of stepping back to why it came about. Like I said, a group of the lakes, lifelong rider, engineering background, used to work in sort of nuclear and oil and gas in the space, but always sort of wanted to build something in an industry that I love, namely cycling, and thought about what things to actually create at the time. And having a chat with a friend at the time, we sort of thought of different things we could do. There's a bike cafe, we could set up we could manufacture and create products, and there were some barriers to do it at the time. Whereas now actually the barriers to creating a lot of businesses are a lot shorter, with 3D printing and lots of sort of web tools for doing various things. But what we settled on was actually building a comparison engine that could tell us where to buy the best stuff, where to buy either bikes or components for the lowest cost and the lowest weight as well. So if you're a bit of a weight weenie, you want to build the lightest bike and do that in real time. Whereas at the time you had to search 20, 30 different websites to find the stuff you wanted. Does it actually fit your bike? And where'd you get it for the best price? So in the end, in 2011, I started the business and set out to build a comparison engine that in short formula enabled you to find out where to buy bikes and components for the best price, but it also added some intelligence behind it, so you could figure out what stuff fitted your bikes. And launched it, and there's still some of the videos I think we could share if needed as a link, and the platform worked really well. We were really passionate about it. We got some really good press exposure in the Times, and we got a decent amount of traffic, but the commercial model was fundamentally flawed behind it. So as much as we were very passionate, we saw the future for it, it required a load of geeks that sat around tables, data munging sort of day in, day out with these different 30,000 product feeds and trying to get it to fit and work and the rest of it. And it just wasn't, well, starting out, I thought it was going to work. But cut a long story short, the reason for the pivots was in part a bigger opportunity came along, whilst at the same time realizing actually the sort of fundamental business model that sat behind what we had created, the comparison engine, was a bit flawed.
Amazing. And with the comparison engine, do you think it's something that sort of now would be easier to build and easier to run? Do you think something that could be resurrected?
Yeah, I mean, the functionality was there and it worked for the end customer. And the challenge was, and you'll probably get this just in terms of the economics of marketing versus what you get back out of it. the way we made money was affiliate marketing. So you
Mm.
paid to click through to Wiggle, which is no longer, or Evans Cycles or whatever. And we generated about 5%, 4 to 8% of the basket value. But that was when a sale was made. So if you sold £1,000 bike, great, you get a decent amount of money back. If you sell a 10 quid pair of gloves, less so. And you're basically in search, you're always competing for either search engine optimization or paying for search ads. And the people you're competing against are the retailers that are actually selling it in the first place, and their margin is 35%, and your margin is very low, only for the people that actually click through when a sale is attributed. That model was going to work. However, there's two really interesting platforms. One's called Bike Matrix, one sort of AI based, that are actually doing this now. They're doing the compatibility logic that sits behind it, but then their commercial model is a lot different. They're sort of working with the industry and working with mechanics to try and make something that the industry uses rather than the consumer has, and that still plugs into e-commerce journeys. So if you tell it what bike you've got, it will just tell you what tires fit or brake pads fit, and that's amazing. That's where you want to do it rather than on a per sale basis. So I'm excited for them that it's happening. I've been in contact with them and actually sort of supporting them in showing them what not to do. But you only learn, you only get better, you only learn through your failures. So it's all part of the journey.
Exactly. And how did you make that leap? Because it's still, obviously, it's still very much about bikes and very much about protecting riders. But how did you make the leap from comparison site to insurance?
So insurance, I have the old business plan back from 2010, 2011. I still have a few copies with me, and as part of that was actually one paragraph was on insurance, but it was really to help support insurers in doing replacements. So when a bike's stolen, because we had all the data they needed, we knew where to buy it for the best price, so we can provide a better service for insurers. We can do it for a better price. So through mutual contact, I had a chat with a guy from Hiscox on the service station in the M56, a chap called Lee Turner. And he basically, I pitched to him what we could do, and he pitched back, well, actually, why don't you build an insurance product? And insurance was not a game that I wanted to get into. That was not what I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I know my calling. But to give it its due, I took it away and had a look at the insurance space. And back in 2014, and this is pre sort of insurtech boom. This is pre a lot of the fintech sort of boom, not all of it necessarily. People that were doing bike insurance just did bike insurance the same as any other product, as music, as mobile phone. So it's just like another additional line. And a lot of the UX was absolutely awful. The worst was 20 questions over 5 pages just to get a quote. And also the way it kind of spoke to the individual. If you had 5 bikes in your garage or 10 bikes in your garage, it was prohibitively expensive. But actually, we knew the behavior was you can only ride one of those bikes at once. So actually, the majority of the risk is when you're riding the bike, not when it's sort of locked in your garage. So Hiscox gave us the ability to rip apart the product and put something together that we, through simplifying the UX, having a much more simple product, articulating it in a way to customers or riders that was easy to understand, that felt like them. It was a bit of a no-brainer. And then if you look at the kind of commercial model that sits behind insurance, well, it's a subscription model. It's all about retention. You've got to grow your new customers, but you've really got to nurture your existing customers, riders, provide value. And then over time, this year we'll make 85% of last year's revenue just from our retained book. Plus, we're growing faster every year. So similar to Spotify and Netflix, any of these Strava subscription models, it's very much the same. Manage your churn, grow the business, grow a great brand that people want to stay with longer term. That's going to grow a lot of value in the future. But it was a hard sell when I came back from the service station on the M56, and it was 6 guys in this little loft office in the centre of Chester who just managing away doing this, and no one wanted to get into insurance. So there was a bit of an internal sell that had to happen. We actually called it Bikmo Plus at the time, and Bikmo was the comparison engine, and Plus was the product. It was a sort of plus product. But straight away, we went to the Tour de France game through Yorkshire in 2014, and we went to the Rafa Festival, and we sold coffee. But if you gave us your email address and answered some questions about insurance, you got free coffee. So come at the end of that festival, we had 2,000 email signatures, and it meant we were selling policies from day one when we went live. And then just through understanding the bike sector, through being able to speak to riders and our partners, retailers and bike brands and so forth, that just gave us that kind of buy into the sector, and that's where it's gone so well. So not an easy pivot, but it's worked very well.
Amazing. And those difficult conversations, because it's a really interesting one, isn't it? How you can create a culture where pivot feels exciting and forward thinking and everybody can get behind it straight away. What sort of learnings would you have from those initial conversations of coming back and telling everybody, I've got a great idea, we're changing? How could you sort of do it differently, or what would you do if you had to, how would you build that culture?
Well, I guess openness to change has to be there in some culture, because even though we're more established, you still have to kind of course correct or spot opportunities and stay abreast of what's happening. So,
Mm.
whilst this is probably that was I'd probably class that as a major pivot. Fundamentally, how we make our money has completely changed. Underlying it all, like, was actually still wanting to use technology to build a service or product that enables people to spend more time riding. And in my mind, the comparison was at the purchase end, insurance is at the sort of protection end. I kind of saw the journey through that. It wasn't like it, from my mind, it wasn't a complete removal once I got comfortable with it. The second was getting our CTO George to actually have a chat with a team from Hiscox and understand that there's a perception of insurance, of course, there is around the sector. It is quite traditional in sort of many ways, but understanding they were kind of backing it for the right reasons. And honestly, day to day, our partnerships team are dealing with cool bike brands and retailers and so forth. Our customer experience team are dealing with riders. They're putting them back on the bikes. That's an amazing part to be part of that experience, to get, you know, send someone into their local retailer with a £5,000, credit just to go and buy a new bike to replace the one that just got nicked. That's quite an empowering thing. So actually, day to day, it's still part of the sort of bike culture. It's just the fundamental underlying product or service that we sell is quite different. So, but I think that just openness to change. We have conversations every day where we have to look at new opportunities and how the market's sort of shifting and changing, and really responding to that as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and it must be much more important now to make sure that's rooted from day one of a new starter, now that you have sort of over 50 employees versus, I think it's in 10 countries now, isn't it? 50 employees in 10 countries versus sort of six of you in the same space.
Just around the table. Yeah, well, I mean, was that forced? It wasn't forced, but yeah, I mean, like, culture, I think is probably the most important factor that gets talked a bit more about now, and it's really hard. You can't necessarily describe a culture, but you know the company's got a good one or a bad one generally from being
Yeah.
within it, don't you? And we've just had an investment push. We had a Series A extension at the back end of last year, and that came with it. We just grown from 36 to 51 people. That's now in 10 countries, and part of the reason we're in 10 countries is because we launched in Europe in 2018. And when we did that, I came to live in Innsbruck. We've got our office in Bavaria as well. So by that very nature, as soon as that kind of happened, we had to get better at being remote. And we've always done it reasonably well. I guess growing up starting business in an age where cloud services, cloud sort of computing was fairly pretty mainstream at the time. It has become easier, and of course, when went into COVID, that just sort of reinforced that actually we've got to become incredibly good at it. And how do you keep culture going through kind of COVID? A lot of that culture is all about people, isn't it? It's all about, as well as a good set of values and sort of beliefs and a way in which working together in a particular way. It's really about the people. And just before this recruitment drive now, having grown sort of into Europe, we spent a lot of time, firstly, on the employer branding, so people understood the company they were coming into, so it wasn't kind of a shock. We had Bikfest is our sort of global gatherings that we have two of every year. The first one was at the back end of last year. We've had travel before that, but these were the more formalized ones. So the employer branding was, letting people know what to expect and to sort of communicate that well. There's a company called Canute who do it particularly well, that Ben Thompson joined us from recently. But I really like their sort of way of putting across where the values stood. And on top of that, we also spent a lot of time on the onboarding, investing into the onboarding, particularly Sean and Kerry on our team. And it's meant that there's a couple of things, one of which people have got up to speed way quicker. So quite often being productive in week two, from having been onboarded, they feel included within the culture because they get a lot of exposure to different people, even if they're not sat in the same room. But then after the back of this recruitment push and people starting, then we had the last big fest, that was in Chester, just outside Chester in Wales at Harden Castle. And again, that brings people together. It just reinforces it to me more and more every time, that face-to-face time is so important. But it's amazing to be virtual, because then you open your recruitment pool from being within a catchment area of commuting to Chester to, well, across Europe. And like I say, we have people in 10 countries now, and it works as efficiently as it did. I think from when I moved to Innsbruck, and we sort of got it all going that way. Um,
Yeah, and that extension, I suppose it's not really a pivot, but it's a change in direction going from a brand in one market to a brand across Europe, to understanding all the different cultures and how that changes, because although everyone's cyclists, it's still there's a lot of differences, aren't there, in how you market, how the partnerships work, etc. So that must also just expand your knowledge and make it easier to grow.
It does now. I think the first jump to launching in Germany and Austria was the biggest one, and that was a kick at the arse with Brexit, because you used to be able to, from the UK, through the freedom of services and passporting a financial, insurance licenses, be able to
Mm.
sell to anywhere in Europe. And after Brexit, we knew that wasn't going to happen, but we didn't know uh, what was going to happen. There was no clarity. I mean, as everyone knows, it was a I won't swear, but it wasn't a great time. So that was a kick up the arse to do it. So in 2018, started the business here, and didn't do quite the budget that we should have really had to do it well. And it's taken longer to learn it, but almost that kind of slightly slower approach to getting used to a market has actually served as well, because there are differences in the expectations of customers and the values and even the channels that they provide. And you're not quite as, say, jokey with financial services in Germany that you can be in the UK through a lot of the neobanks and stuff. There are culturally, there's different channels, and there's different language and so forth that you need. But now we know what went wrong or what we didn't do as well. We had a really good retro on it, and how not to do a territory launch was the title of the session of the Miro board, and that was really useful to just to highlight what we didn't do well. And what that actually led into was we launched Belgium in I think 6 weeks from scratch. Two new languages, new partners, new products, legal compliance, all that sort of stuff. Through learning what not to do well, just being more organised with it, we did it quicker, and we did it for way less cost than we did before. And now we have a European entity. Of course, we can sell it across Europe, and that's one of the benefits of being in Europe with an entity. You can do that, but I think we're now at the stage that we know how to scale. We're going to be launching in probably 3, 4 more territories in Europe this year. But again, we can be efficient and quite quick with it, just through having learnt mistakes along the way.
Amazing. Could you tell us some of those learnings that, how did it make it so much cheaper and so much faster to launch in Belgium than say Germany?
So some of it is technical, because we built our platform from scratch, because in 2014 that we couldn't buy any of these big insurance platforms. Built it from scratch. That can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. And we're slightly different. We're in a slightly different mindset now as to there's some really great products, API, open API sort of systems over there that can connect with the best and class stuff. There was a technical element over learning the languages, and actually having euros, simple things as much as they use a comma for the decimal points, not a full stop, which is kind of the other way around. There's simple stuff, but that can make a massive cause issues with your database when you go for it. Just in terms of the kind of how we did the translation, we there's a lot of services out there now that can really support the translation very well. We can be quite efficient in terms of our legal and compliance stuff. We've built a product, an insurance product, sort of a modular product that basically we can use anywhere in Europe. You just change the tax rate, and there's some different sort of factors we can play with depending on the pricing in the market to work. So the product can be picked up and taken. We just have to get some of the translation stuff done. One of the bigger ones is actually we kind of coming off the back of those other launches, we sort of had a crib sheet, and there's probably 8 different sections of what do we need to know to enter a market. One of which is the business landscape, 2 of which is the kind of customer landscape, who are the customers. 3, we know the partner types to go for in terms of our business, price comparison engines, retailers, distributors, all that sort of stuff. Who does this? Bike leasing businesses, other tax efficient schemes for buying bikes. So there's list of lots of different factors, employment law sort of factors as well. And we've got funded research from, I think that's from the Welsh government, but in the UK, you do get a lot of support for doing it. They will do research in a market, and if you're quite specific about what you want, the outcomes from that can be awesome. So we've got probably 4 or 5 70-page documents that's basically our blueprint of how to go into a new territory. It took very little effort for us to do that, but we've got government support for doing it. So I think just through knowing what to look for or what things are going to be the levers as to whether you'll succeed in a country or not are really good to know. And then it allows you just to focus on the things that matter first. And, entering a market, we always have a sort of sequential process because putting bums on seats, boots on the ground is expensive,
Yeah.
especially when you add in, depending where they sit, taxes and employment costs that sit on top of that. So just knowing what to focus on first. Can you have a lightweight entry into a market? Do you need to go for gas, all that sort of stuff? I think we can be a lot more efficient now than we were first time.
It's exciting. So the next 3 or 4 territories, then you can see that you'll just pick up speed each time, and how you. Always think it's interesting is how people create a playbook of what did we learn last time, what as you said, like how to do it, what did we do wrong, learning that to actually make sure you remember it and it all builds up. Like the compound interest of your experience is every market you go into. And how do you so talking about some of the other things that you mentioned at first, so going from, there's obviously things you're doing on a daily basis that change your sort of business as usual, but what have been these sort of step change points of growth that are really, obviously expanding into other markets is a big one, but what else has really sort of changed your trajectory over the last few years?
Yeah. Well, I think, as you mentioned, the kind of BAU growth for us is kind of onboarding either direct marketing, arguably, is BAU growth. You can make optimizations over time. One of those might have a bigger impact or a smaller impact or a negative impact. Who knows? The same as we've got sort of our, building up retailers, our network of retailers. They over time will make a big difference. It's increasing that drip. Because if the drip gets to 100, 200 retailers, well, that becomes a big drip. That starts to feed it. But the thing we've noticed over time is actually onboarding certain partners have been step change projects, and that's what we're always looking for year on year, aligning both optimizations and BAU growth with kind of step change projects. What's our next thing we'd like to focus on? And like earlier on in our I guess the history of the business, one of the big ones was Deliveroo. We still insure the Deliveroo riders in the UK for income protection, sickness benefits, and really interesting business to work with. It was not an easy business to land, but now since landing, we retained that business for I think 6 years now. I think part of the reason we landed that, not because we had experience necessarily in the gig economy insurance space, but because we were a young, agile, and hungry company, we were willing to sort of work with them. They were a fast-moving business, sort of quite fluid, and that doesn't necessarily align with insurer expectations of what's of the type of organisation they necessarily like to work with. They like stable, steady, known sort of stuff, and that's not necessarily what Deliveroo were at that time. So we kind of persisted, and we invest a lot into our partnerships. And when we get to when we win a partnership, we invest loads into it to understand the business, understand how to create value for their members or riders or customers or whatever that thing is, and then make sure over time we're constantly sort of questioning ourselves, what more can we do for this partner? So that was a big one. Delivery was a really big one, and that's slightly out there because it's a bit commercial insurance. Other ones have been, big sort of federations. We work with British Cycling and Irish Cycling, the Austrian Cycling Federation. Again, those are kind of step change ones that take a bit longer to kind of win. But the way in which normally the kind of step change sort of opportunities work for us is they're not normally short term. You don't just stumble across a massive bike brand or this huge opportunity and overnight you're making money. That's not how they work. It takes time. I think one of the things I think you need to do for that is stay very close to your sector, be it industry papers, be it going to this a sector data, having maybe advisors around your business that are like super close to parts of the sector, and just seeing and being open to how those are shifting over time. One of the biggest ones that we're investing into is bike leasing in Europe. 50% of Canyon Bikes, which is the biggest global direct-to-consumer manufacturer, 50% of the bikes in Germany are sold through bike leasing, Jobrat, which is basically like Cycle Scheme, but you don't pay over 12 months, you pay over 4 years. Insurance is included with it, which is fantastic for us because it means retention is almost 100%. But you're staring into what is going to be one of the most dominant forms of bike ownership in Europe. So you have to kind of go with it, but you can't switch it on overnight. So we work with some smaller partners to start with, and we're growing up the scale of those sort of over time. The really nice thing about those is that that's long-term growth, but solid growth. And if you, again, onboarding these partners over time, you will see, your kind of growth curve start to go up. And again, if you're retaining 100% of last year's business with bike leasing, plus 80% of your sort of direct consumer business, that creates a really, really powerful, I think, a really, really strong business.
Amazing. And is that how you minimize risk when you're going into these new sectors, is to go with the smaller partners that are possibly quicker to set up with, rather than starting without any experience and going directly for one that might take 6-12 months, because it's such a common problem, especially in B2B, where sales cycles are so long that you start something and you won't really realize the value for 12-18 months at least, but also the possibility of it going wrong and losing that is quite high. So how do you, talk to us about minimizing that risk?
Yeah, absolutely minimizing the risk. And I think you need certain wins over time. What I find is that things cascade over time. When we won Deliveroo, of course, we shout about that. People sort of pick up, they really do recognize that, that association with a kind of a strong brand, so that grows over time. But yeah, you ain't going to win overnight. Younger businesses are easier to work with. They will get stuff launched quicker, but they more often than not, they won't necessarily live up to growth expectations that they have set
Mm.
forward. That's just the nature of sort of young businesses. But you are likely to back. I think you get better every time at spotting the ones that are more likely to deliver, they're more likely to sort of come out and actually support that. And then over time, yeah, you're really proving yourself to look at these bigger fish. But like you say, yeah, some of the leasing partners, they aren't going to renew people for 3 or 4 years, but you have to be part of that conversation early on. And this is part of, I think, where it comes to, as well as being there and being present and being, even advocacy and lobbying and stuff within your own sector, being very present, having a really strong brand. We're a B Corp, which you might notice there. I think having purpose, having your values very clear and talking about them constantly, I think is like a really big thread to, when a company is looking at to partner with someone else, what do they stand for? What are other people saying about them? And whilst big company stuff can be a validation, is a great validation. I don't think it's everything, but it's just the ability to win one of those bigger partners doesn't happen overnight, does it? So we're making investments now we won't see realized for 2 years, and that's a tough thing to do. But then you need to balance that with near-term revenue, because of course, especially if you're investor backed or you've got good growth ambitions, you need to match that with sort of near-term revenue as well, which is why you can't just focus on one thing. I think the one thing we have done, which I'm really proud of, is we have got a really nice broad spectrum of acquisition channels. We are not, whilst our direct channel is in our non-B2B2C, our non-partnerships one is 50% of our business. Out of that, performance marketing is only, say, 20%, where actually for some businesses it's 80-90%. These partnerships again deliver a lot of value, and they're the sort of long-term partners for us as well. And then we've got some of the bigger ones that might not happen for 2 years, but it means over time we are more resilient now than we were. Delivery, when we first won them, made up probably 30% of our 40% of our revenue. Lose that next year, and that's an issue for you. Right now, it's it's very low single-digit percentages, which is great. But I think just having that sort of distribution of revenue acquisition channels, whatever you describe it, I think is really important for business resilience. I think we're seeing more of that, especially now post-COVID, all the financial sort of challenges, interest rate hikes and the rest of it. The more you can be resilient, I think the better you stand being around for the next 10 years, which unfortunately many businesses still won't.
Yeah, 100%. I was always told when I was setting this up that I needed to make sure that no client was ever over 12%, because then it just meant that it just protected you. So it meant that one loss wouldn't affect, and it wouldn't affect jobs or anything like that. Um,
Yeah.
Out of all of this, I know that we're getting to the end,
Yeah.
but out of all of this, what's your sort of core advice? You've given so much advice, but if you could pick sort of 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you'd give to sort of early stage founders now, what would you say?
I think it's really hard choosing how to spend your time. as a founder. I think where to spend your efforts, and even now, I think arguably as a CEO of a business, as a founder of a business, you need to be focusing your efforts and time on the areas that the business most needs. A lot of the time, that's not the area that you necessarily want to spend time, but you have to just focus on that area. If there's a blockage, if there's a challenge in a particular area, or people-related issues, you need to do that. I think it's really sort of doubling down on what your USP is and speaking to as many people as possible to articulate that in a way that does that make sense? Do they understand what I'm saying? Because when you then have to you pitch to a business, I think someone has to get it in the first 10 seconds. They need to get it, understand it, and what the value is to me to really start to engage and start to work with you on potentially them becoming a client of whatever it is that you do. Um, I think trying to be ruthless with time. It's very easy to get busy,
Mm.
especially in the era of Slack notifications and emails and the rest of it. And I'm not perfect at it at all in any way, shape, or form. But I think focus time and understanding what your rhythm is throughout the day. I'm best in the mornings. In the afternoon, I choose different work and do some work in the evenings for the next day, but then start early the next day. So I think understanding your rhythm and how you kind of work within the day will allow you to, make decisions at the right time. I don't. My decision making time is the morning. I would never do that last thing at night. I'd start to consider stuff, but not make decisions. I think that's probably really important. And I think that the last thing is probably I mentioned about talking to people and getting good at the pitch, but I do think the more people you speak to about your idea, the more you get either validation or if you speak to the right people, they will correct you if you're not quite on the right sort of path. And I've been very fortunate to have people around me within the business that I use as a peer group to bounce ideas off who've got particular specialisms and so forth. And I do try and pass that on to people who are starting businesses just to you might sort of course correct them in a certain way which enables them to focus their mind in the right sort of space. You might not have any advice to give them, that's the nature of the beast, but if you can just add a few bits here and there, I think it can help the young founder get on track.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And so, where should people go? Where's the best place to go to find out more about Bikmo?
If you head to bikmo.com, it'll adjust the website for wherever you're based. Check out, LinkedIn is a bit more up to you from a business standpoint. I'm David George on LinkedIn. If you just type in Dave George Bikmo, we've got Instagram feeds and the rest of it. I'm less of an X/Twitter person, but LinkedIn's probably the best sort of B2B channel. So happy to answer any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll be doing a wrap up of this in our Thursday newsletter, and it's available to rewatch on LinkedIn as soon as we sign off now. But thank you so much and really appreciate all of your advice today. It was brilliant. Thank you.
No problem. Nice to speak, Lucy. Cheers.
Bye
Bye.
bye.